Hi everyone, welcome to the Self-Created Health webinar. I've seen that we've got lots of really lovely old and new familiar faces that have signed up, so it's really lovely to know that you are online with me. So welcome, and as you all probably know, it's fireworks night, so if you hear any fireworks in the background, then you just have to bear with me and maybe imagine the lovely colourful displays that are going with it rather than just the pops and the bangs that are going on outside. So I hope you're all well, and sending much love to everybody. So you've signed in to hear about self-created health, and I know a couple of you have taken the workshop already and you just want to get some energy and refresh. Some of you are very familiar with energy work and emotional work, and you're practitioners of various different therapies. And some of you are interested for your own physical healing or a family member's physical healing. And so just what I ask is that you bear with me. I'm going to try and cover this in as broad a way as possible so that everybody gets something out of it and a good level of understanding, regardless of your background with emotional work. So first of all, let's just go over how Richard discovered self-created health and what it actually is, because this is something I get asked all the time. So hopefully I'll be able to cover it for you in enough depth that you really understand it. So a question I always get asked is, what is the difference between level 1 and level 2? And various different questions. So I'm going to try and cover as many as I can. So first of all, what happens when you hit a wall with level 1 and level 2? What I mean by this is, I'd say 90%, Richard says 90% of the time, when you apply level 1 and level 2 healing, you will achieve the result that you're looking for. 10% of the time, you'll experience a situation where either the condition reoccurs, it comes back, or it seems to get better and then revert again, and you're kind of just hovering over a line where you're not moving anywhere, or it just has no effect at all. And that's where self-created health comes in. Self-created health provides a way of determining what the emotional causations are for our pain and illnesses, for physical conditions. So it's very much geared around emotional healing. When you hit a wall, it's because there's a huge emotional blockage there. And you could be there for a long time giving energy healing, but if there is a huge emotional wall or emotional blockage that wants to be seen, that's the reason why you're not achieving the result with level 1 or level 2. So that's what self-created health is about. It was specifically designed for those whose conditions reoccur or do not find relief with energy work. So for conditions that persist or reoccur, finding the emotional root is absolutely necessary. And self-created health techniques address this. So let's just look at that for a second, what we mean by emotional and physical causation and what the link between the two is. Now, most doctors say that 60 to 90% of all conditions have emotional roots. Richard, and I totally agree, says that 100% of all conditions have emotional roots. So let's just look at the word placebo for a second. So psychosomatic medicine has known for a long time that suggestions and beliefs can have a huge role in the process of healing and the sort of symptoms that someone has. So we know that billions of pounds are spent each year trying to figure out if a drug works better than a placebo. A placebo is like a sugar pill. So even when a drug works just a few percentage points better than the suggestion, it's often called a miracle drug. So positive suggestions can result in a really wide range of healing, but at the same time, a negative suggestion, so for example, a doctor saying you have such and such time left, or you have this percentage chance of getting better, can have a really disastrous effect and a prophetic result. And this is known as the nocebo effect, so just as powerful. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is because we can see that the mind and the emotions have a huge role in the health of the body. Otherwise, there wouldn't be placebo effects and nocebo effects. So in its most extreme case, I find this absolutely fascinating. You can see this with people with multiple personality disorders. Sometimes, so somebody who's got more than one personality is what I mean. And sometimes this will show us, and a lot of studies have been done around this, that the mind has the capability of things that we would have never imagined. So it's been documented that the same person, the same physical person with various personalities, one of the personalities would have diabetes and another wouldn't. One personality may be colorblind and the other may not be colorblind. One personality has a 3rd-degree burn and another personality will heal really, really fast. I was recently, a couple of weeks ago, I was sent an amazing video. It's probably the most extreme example of this I've ever seen. You might have seen it, of a lady who had 64 personalities. And in one of the personalities, she was completely blind and she had a guide dog. And in another of her personalities, she could see totally well. And I thought that was, I mean, I've never seen such an extreme example of the mind's role in the physical body. And just to kind of, if you wanted to do any background reading on that, if you have a look at Dr. Bruce Lipton's work, I always mention this because it's so mind-blowing, his work. And what he says is, if you imagine that the body is like, if you imagine that all your beliefs are like a big kind of control panel, and you had all these switches in the control panel, depending on your belief system, the various switches are switched on and off, and it happens in real time. And the thing that really got me the most about his work was when somebody said, how long does healing take to happen? And traditionally we'd always said, well, you know, it takes, everybody's got their own healing time, and that's still true. But what Bruce Lipton says is it happens in real time. So it's literally like a switch that's flicked, depending on your belief system. So when you change the way you look at things, that old Wayne Dyer quote, the things you look at change. So literally it happens in real time. In the moment of release, when you shift your perception on whatever it is that you were working with emotionally, that takes place there and then in the body. So it happens instantaneously. There is no delay time. The delay time in healing happens depending on how long it takes the person to shift their beliefs and shift their viewpoint. That's the answer, according to Bruce Lipton, as to how long healing takes to happen. And I totally agree with that. And I think it opens us up to phenomenal change and very exciting scope for healing. And self-created health is one very powerful way to do that quickly. So we know that the mind and the emotions have got a huge role in the health of the body. And Richard believes that the body has the ability to be sick, to tell us how we've stopped expressing ourselves, how we've stopped loving. So his belief, and I totally have seen this work so many times now, is that illness, physical conditions, are the body's ability to express unexpressed emotions and remind us to come back. So therefore, if we have the ability to make ourselves sick or unwell, then we definitely have the ability to make ourselves well. So from his experience, he believes the body has the ability to express suppressed emotions as physical symptoms into a reality in either one or more than one area of our lives. So health, relationships, success, finances, etc. So to summarize that, he believes that the body has the ability to be sick or distressed, not as a dysfunction. And this is the complete difference between looking at something mechanically. So if we look at the body mechanically and we say, there's something wrong with it, it's lost, it's dysfunctional, let's try and just apply a mechanical approach to it and correct the dysfunction. Let's change the part. So this is a very different way of viewing the body, where we don't view it mechanically in that way. Instead, we view physical condition as a communication from our own higher consciousness. So symptoms in the body or life are just a mirror of the symptoms of our emotional reality. So when we heal the emotions, then we heal that area of our life. I hope that's making sense to everybody so far. When I talk about emotions, most people avoid painful emotions, and it takes a lot of courage to open that door. So after using self-created health, people usually experience gratitude for even having the illness to begin with and its cause, because getting back that love is so much more important than they might have felt previously with the discomfort of what they were feeling. Oh, that was a very big bang outside my window. I hope you didn't hear that one. How did Richard discover self-created health? So this has been going on for him, this emotional exploration, for about 30 years now. So if you go back 30 years, one day Richard woke up with very sort of severe flu-like symptoms, and he had a raging fever, and he really thought he was going to be unwell with full-blown flu for about a week. And he had just attended a workshop with his spiritual teacher called Lazarus, who he studied with for 15 years, and Lazarus mentored him. And one thing that really stuck out for Richard was that Lazarus was really clear on one thing, and he said, all physical conditions have an emotional link, and there is one particular emotion that is underneath every single physical condition, but nothing else to it, and that emotion is anger, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But that's all he said. That's all he had to say. He had no roadmap or anything like that. He just gave him that knowledge. So when Richard woke up with the flu symptoms, all he had was, well, I've got a rough idea that something's made me angry, but what else do I do with this? So he started going through everything that had happened to him recently, and trying to pull things up into his memory, what could have made him angry. But it's not so easy to do it that way, where you're randomly just pulling on events, trying to find a match. And he remembered that a few weeks earlier, his housemates had said something really hurtful and humiliating to him. So he decided to really express his feelings about that, and cry and shout and just get it out of his system. And then he went out for a coffee, and he said he was sitting in the sun, in the California sun, having a coffee, and he realized that his flu symptoms had completely 100% disappeared. And then he knew he was onto something. So he spent 30 years afterwards trying to work out what he had done, because although he knew there was a connection and it was completely 100% linked, he didn't know how to get there in a more structured way, and it felt very open and broad to just try and connect random events that happened in his life to physical conditions. So he spent 30 years putting together this work, and that's why he calls it his most important work, because he really left no stone unturned. And what I mean by that is that he studied every emotional healing method out there that he could get his hands on, and he said he felt they all gave him something, and they all had something really wonderful to share, but they felt incomplete to him. And one of the reasons that they felt incomplete is, if you've learned level 1 and level 2, you'll know that the thing that that quantum touch is built on and based on, the foundation of the whole modality, is love. And most of the things that he was looking at never focused at the end result being returning back to self-love. And he really felt that had to be in there, and that had to be the foundation in order for the healing to be complete. So eventually he came up with this really simplistic roadmap of how to get from one end to the other. So first of all, what we need to understand here is, again, whatever we don't express emotionally gets expressed physically. That's a really easy way to think of it. So it's always being expressed. But if it isn't expressed emotionally, it just gets expressed physically. The expression is still there. So when you give it a chance to be expressed emotionally, it no longer has a purpose physically. So when we have a physical condition, it's actually a communication from our higher self saying, come back. Look at this. There's something that wants to be seen. Look at it, have it expressed, and then come back. But it's a challenge for a lot of people to say, well, what is it? What am I looking at? How am I supposed to put two and two together? And most of the time, as people try to work out the cause, this is, most of the time, people try and work out their own cause. They get 2 and 2 and they get 5. And that is because you're always looking for something that you don't want to see. So put it this way, if you would rather express it physically in your body, it's because it's too painful for you to look at emotionally. And so it has got suppressed and buried within the body, turned inwards, and it gets expressed physically. So it's usually incredibly difficult to see your own story. And the other thing is it's never what you think it is. I find that, and I've done this hundreds of times now with people, I find that it's never what you think it is. It's usually adjacent to what you think it is. So it might be the same situation, but it involves someone else, somebody who you thought, I can't possibly express anger towards that person, and you pin it on somebody else. So that's something that's really common. We know, I always bring this up in level 1 and level 2 for those that have taken those workshops with me, that the component, what is the common component in every single physical condition out there, everything, will always have an element of inflammation of whatever area of the body that you're talking about. So it's the most common symptom in all physical conditions. Now, if we pull apart the word inflammation, I find this really interesting. Pull apart the word inflammation, you've got inflamed, and then you've got flame. And what is a flame? It's a fire. A fire is red hot emotion. So what is red hot emotion? It's anger. So underneath, as Lazarus taught Richard, underneath every single physical condition is anger. And of course, we know that under every physical condition is inflammation. So when the anger is expressed, the inflammation goes down. So how the physical symptoms hold the message of the emotional condition is how it's stored in the body. So going back to what is the emotional condition that's being expressed physically, this is where step 1 of self-created health comes in, and this is called the discovery process. Now, self-created health is a 7-step process, and it's really one of the things Richard's very gifted at is taking quite broad, complex, expansive subjects or topics or elements and simplifying them down into a very accessible, usable process. And this one has 7 steps, and all of the steps need to be complete for the full healing to happen. So often people who've done a lot of emotional work will come on the workshop and they'll be familiar with the steps, or familiar with a couple of the steps even, but they won't be familiar with it in this order. And certainly the last step of self-love is usually left off, and that's the most important step. So the 7 steps give you a very guided way to complete the process. Recently, I was speaking to someone who had been on a emotional healing 4-day workshop with another modality, teaches something that's very popular with a lot of people, and it's about expressing your emotions. And they have to really feel it and scream and shout and all the rest of it. And they came out and they said to me, I didn't feel it was very contained, and I also wasn't entirely comfortable with sharing such personal details with the stranger. And I really understood that. And in the self-created health process, one of the things I love is you don't need to share any of the personal details that you don't want to. In fact, you could actually say hardly anything at all from step 2 onwards. All the work you do is by yourself. So let me just clarify that. Step 1 is the discovery process, where you work in pairs and you help the other person to determine the exact emotional event and trigger that caused the physical condition. That's how specific it is. And the discovery process, from a inquisitive point of view is always my favorite part, because it's so accurate every single time. I'd say 99% of the time you will hit the exact emotional event, and you will be amazed at the imprint, the precise nature of the process. It is so easy to do, and it's very, very interesting, and you start to see the patterns emerging with different types of people. So what I mean by that is, you'll notice that people, for instance, who are in certain stages of life will often have similar conditions arise, which is why they'll say, yes, when you hit this age, oh, that's when these aches and pains kick in. It isn't that that's when those aches and pains kick in. It's that's when certain emotions kick in. For instance, retirement. I've seen that a lot. People who retire, who don't want to retire, who love what they do and suddenly feel fearful about what they're going to do in the future, or suddenly they feel they haven't got the same level of purpose that they had, or that younger people are coming in and taking their position, whatever emotions are associated with that, produce similar conditions. So it's not that you're at a certain stage so you're going to get that condition, it's that there are very common emotions felt for all of us at different stages of our life, but it's how you process those emotions and the way you view those things that determines the outcome. So you've got this amazing discovery process that once you've done it a few times, within half an hour, 40 minutes maximum, you'll be able to find the cause with someone, the exact cause of their physical condition. And the good thing about this work is that the bigger the physical condition, the easier it is to find the cause, because there's more emotional resonance behind it. So something that bothers someone mildly, like a slight twitch that they hardly notice, that's actually a lot harder to find the cause of than something that's really big and it's got a big label attached to it. It's not a big physical condition. You'll find the cause of that really easily, really quickly. So we've got the discovery process where you work in pairs. You don't need to tell the person, anything that you don't want to tell them. And from that point, from step 2 to 7, the rest of the process is done by yourself. So there really is no need to divulge any information that you don't feel comfortable with. And it's a very contained and safe, guided step process. So what I mean by that is it's work that's done internally in a meditative way, and you're given the exact steps of what to do. Or some people prefer to do it in writing, so you can do it that way. It depends on what you prefer. And by the end of it, step 7, returning to self-love, you feel a huge connection to yourself. So sometimes people call this soul retrieval, because it's like you've reclaimed a fragment of yourself that had been lost in a story. So you bring that back in and return it to love. The format of the actual workshop is, on day 1, we get straight in there. So just so you know, it's not like level 1 and 2 where you're doing energy healing. Just to really clarify that, there is no energy healing in this workshop. This workshop is about exploring emotional healing, and so it is done in a non sort of hands-on or hands-off way. It's done with deep personal work. So we have a lot of discussion, and you get plenty of practice time to explore your own emotions and to kick your process off, so you can really get going. You get 2 or 3 allotted time slots to practice finding emotional causations with people, to have your own cause found, which happens regularly in the workshops. And you start your healing process. By the time you've finished, you are very clear on the 7 steps of the process. You know them inside out. You've done a huge amount of work towards expressing your own emotions in the workshop, and it's an incredibly liberating ending. So you should walk out feeling really lifted and very, very released. The kind of people that come on the workshop, so who is suited to self-created health? And I get asked this all the time. I find it it's a good and interesting question, because people that attend level 1 and 2 are often using it for their work, or they're very playful and they want to just play with energy. And the self-created health workshop, sometimes the word emotion will put people off, and they'll say, oh no, I don't want to look there. And so those kind of people tend not to come to this workshop. But I have to say, this workshop is probably, well, Richard says this outright, it's his most important work, because to not look at the emotions is to miss out a huge chunk of the work. So it's the other side of the coin. So anybody who's interested in the psyche, in emotional work, or if you want to help yourself or a family member, or you are someone who has an existing therapy practice in any of the, whether it's in a very traditional way or in an alternative way, this work, I mean, what it does is it speeds up the results by 1,000-fold. What I mean by that is people who spend years in analysis working out the cause, they probably will get there, but I just think, why spend years when you can do it in 40 minutes? So this is for those people who are very interested in getting to the point, really, and getting to the other side quickly. So another question that I get asked is, well, I've got a bad memory and I don't remember. What if I can't remember the event? And the answer to that question is, we don't forget anything. We remember everything. It's just that if you think you can't remember something, it's just your conscious mind has blocked it out. And I've seen that quite a few times in workshops where people say that, well, what if I don't remember? And they remember every single thing. It's just that they had blocked it out. And the release and the relief and the absolute freedom in expressing what they thought they had forgot is huge. And those people often have amazing healing results. Another thing people say is, I feel nervous about looking at my emotions. And I don't blame them. It does take courage. It absolutely does. But I feel more nervous about not looking at my emotions. So when I weigh up the two, I definitely go for the looking option, simply because when you have gone through something, you have gone through something, you're at the other side. And when you avoid something, it's like that pot on the stove that kind of bubbles up, and then you put the lid on it and you suppress it back down, it will bubble back up. And whether it bubbles back up as a physical condition or it plays out in your relationships or whatever it is, you're always looking at it. You may just be looking at it physically. I'd rather look at it emotionally and get to the other side. And it's a much greater feeling. And it's also a very triumphant feeling. It's a very grounding thing to do. The kind of results you can expect from self-created health are everything from small results to the miraculous. And I really mean that. Usually when people find their cause, which happens in step 1 of the 7-step process within sort of 30, 40 minutes, 20 to 30% of their symptoms go immediately, just from knowing the cause. But that's not enough. I mean, you get that massive release immediately, but you've got to take it through to the other side. So I just want to give you some examples of some of the conditions that I've worked with in the last year, I think, maybe a bit longer, but I was having a look through my case studies and different people's notes and just making a quick note of some of the conditions that I've worked with. Now, I was quite taken aback at the diversity here. So I've got lipedema, tissue disorders, swollen ankles, early menopause, extreme intolerances to food. And this is working with a lady who's literally tried everything under the sun. And working with that with self-created health is very powerful, very, very powerful. IBS, colitis, anxiety, panic attacks, fibromyalgia, HIV, chronic migraines, tinnitus, scoliosis, artist's block. You can see the diversity of conditions here. Asthma, eczema, back pain. And this one was very interesting. Involuntary night movements. This particular man was having huge movements in the middle of the night that were driving his wife mad. He would literally flip up and down onto his bed with such force and wake her up, and he had no recollection of it in the morning. So when you talk about what if I can't remember the event, he had never even experienced the physical event. It was only what his wife was telling him that he was doing. So he couldn't even describe the symptoms. And we managed to get to the bottom of it within, say, 30 minutes of a class demo. And it was absolutely fascinating, because it was another example to me of how we record everything. We just think that we don't, but we do. And we got to the bottom of that, and he had amazing release. Allergies to mosquito bites, depression. These are just a few that were kind of the first ones I looked at, and I really thought, wow, you can work with absolutely anything with this. When I said artist block, I put that in there on purpose to show you that sometimes it's not necessarily a physical condition, but you can work with something that, like procrastination or artist block or depression, things like that, that manifest in people's lives. So you can really go quite broad with this. A question that I've been asked is, what is the difference between this and other emotional healing techniques? It's a great question. Now, I have personally studied so many different emotional healing techniques, and had so many different people coming on the workshops who are either teachers of other techniques or really skilled. So I've definitely had a lot of exposure to the other techniques out there. And this is, I'm going to give you my feedback and also what Richard says as well, and what other people say. So Richard's wording is that a lot of the techniques out there are what he calls emotional bypass techniques, which are nothing more than a natural plaster. In other words, let me see what I can do to go round and circumvent the issue as much as possible without having to feel it and look at it. And he said that's just one way to, that's avoidance, basically. And the key here of the success of this method is actually facing it head on, feeling it. But you would be so surprised at how quickly it releases as soon as you do that. All the charge goes. So you have to feel it to release it. And that's one of the big differences. The other difference is, because there are elements that you will have recognized from other places if you've done a lot of this work, is the order of self-created health is where the success is from. In level 1 and level 2, Richard says, be creative with this. Just take the tools, play with them, create your own energy signature, then come back and tell us what you've found. And he says the opposite with self-created health. He says, don't change a thing. It's taken me 30 years to get to this. This works, and this specific order works, so stick with the process. And it's so true. It is foolproof, the very specific 7 steps. So that's a difference. And the other difference is that you always end with self-love. It's very easy, it's very accessible, it's very safe, and it's a very contained space. And that's another difference. You'll always, your conscious mind will always create a cushion around you. You'll never be given anything that you are not able to deal with. So you'll never be shown an event that is too much for you to process. I've seen this many times where people get shown little by little what they're comfortable with seeing. You'll always only, remember, you're working with the higher intelligence here, so you will go at your own pace, which is why some people will have incremental changes and healings, and some people will have a full wham bam, the healing is done in one session. And that's because they're ready to see the full picture. And that's okay, there's no right or wrong, it is at your own pace. But it's a very exciting way to work with health, I find. Do I need to take level 1 and level 2 to take self-created health? The answer to that question is no. And the reason is because Richard knew that there would be a lot of people who were fascinated by the emotional work, people like counselors, therapists who weren't interested in healing necessarily, and he wanted this to be open to them as well. So it's standalone workshop. It's open to everybody, whether you've got experience or not, and everybody's welcome. So you don't need to have done any healing work before at all. How will this help my clients and my healing practice? That's a great question. From my perspective, it has opened up my client work tremendously, to the point where I get such a buzz from doing the discovery process with people, because it's so spot on, that I mean, there was one point where I thought, my God, I could actually do this all day, where I'm just doing discovery processes with people, because they're so fascinating. But I love the level 1 and 2 so much, so I wouldn't just do that. But it just showed me how much a person could literally build an entire practice based on just doing this work. I personally think this should be in every doctor's surgery. It's so valuable. So it opens up your ability to work with clients, family, friends in a whole new way. There is a new, just to let you know, there is a new self-created health program that's coming out that Quantum Touch are going to release, and that's because what they want is to create a sort of self-created health practitioner program at some stage where everybody will have done the same amount of training before they go out and say they're a self-created health practitioner, because it really is, some people take it into the mental health field, and in the same way that any type of mental health work that you would be doing, you would be trained to a certain level before having exposure, and you'd have done a certain amount of case studies with people under supervision. That's what they want to create with self-created health, to get it into a very sort of respected and reputable level of skill. So there are some people who say, yep, I'm going to go for the self-created health practitioner program when it comes out. And then, as usual, and this is totally fine, there are some people who say, no, I'm just going to go under my existing qualifications, whatever they may be, and I integrate everything that I learn into my existing practice. The only the way that Quantum Touch have packaged it is that if you want to call yourself a self-created health practitioner, then you take that program. However, you do not need to be a self-created health practitioner to benefit from the work and integrate it. I hope that makes sense. What if I don't find the exact event? People say, well, what if I don't get my trigger event? And the answer to that is sometimes this works in layers like an onion. So sometimes, most of the time, I found that I'd say 90+% of the time people get the exact event. And the other small percentage of people are only ready to see it layer by layer, and that's okay too. You never rush a person to see whatever is going on there, and it will emerge and reveal itself in the perfect time for that person. The main thing is having the tools and keeping on to use them. So those are some of the questions that have been sent in to me. But I just wanted to read you. I've got a couple of recent emails actually in the last couple of days. I got sent some self-created health emails from people, and then I've got some others that I wanted to share with you, because I think it's always nice for you to hear other people's stories as well as my own in their words. So here's one of them. This is from a lovely client who had also done the self-created health workshop. A few months after working through the self-created health process for my panic attacks, I started to have mild dizziness symptoms. I went to a doctor and they told me it was connected with a virus, that I shouldn't move my head in the direction that made the dizziness worse. While I was at the doctor's, he asked me about my migraines, how often they occurred and how bad they were. I described the symptoms and how often they happened, and he responded by saying, well, they weren't that bad, and so there's no need to investigate them. So I left there feeling there was no solution, and I just had to put up with both my dizziness and migraines. The dizziness got better a couple of weeks later, but 6 months after this, I had an episode that lasted for 2 days and was so bad I could barely stand. I couldn't walk without holding on to things. Even lying down, I felt the room was spinning around my head. As the doctor had been unable to help me previously, I didn't see the point of going back, and instead I contacted Karina, as I felt the symptoms may be emotionally related. Karina worked through the self-created health process with me again, and she very quickly helped me to get to the root of the symptoms, which made perfect sense to me. She asked me while I was there whether I'd like to get to the root of my migraines, and I agreed straight away. In complete contrast to the doctor, who made me feel like there was no solution for my symptoms, Karina said she felt I could stop my migraines from happening and made me feel it was possible to resolve the symptoms completely, which was a huge relief in itself. Since resolving the underlying emotions related to my dizziness, I haven't had any further episodes. My migraines are also much less frequent. I believe once the emotions causing them are completely resolved, they'll stop altogether. While I was working through the emotions associated with my symptoms, my friend did some QT healing sessions with me, which also really helped. So that was sent to me a couple of days ago by a client. And again, when you open people up to the possibility that they can heal and it's just energy that needs to move, you'd be surprised at how quickly things shift. So that was one. Oh, she said something else. I think that one of the great things about the self-created health process is the possibility of being able to get to the root cause of symptoms so quickly without the need to talk about details of personal issues. I also now feel that this process has enabled me to resolve emotions which would have otherwise remained suppressed. So that was one. Here was another one. This one was absolutely awesome. This was sent to me from the last, she only actually sent it to me a couple of days ago, but it was written by someone who attended the last Self-Created Health workshop. And I'm just going to read you what she said. First of all, I flew all the way from Kuwait to the United Kingdom to attend the Self-Created Health workshop with Karina in October. I arrived at that class with such a severe back pain that I described it as killer during the first exercises. And while my colleague was doing the questioning, she asked me, when did all this start? And I said I had had this killer back pain since 1998, which I thought when I heard that was quite immense. And while going through the exercise, I started to have insights about what I thought was the cause. And suddenly, when I figured out this truly is the cause, the pain just disappeared. Boom, just like that, in seconds, it disappeared and hasn't come back. And I was so surprised by that moment. Later on that day, I did the anger release exercise and I directly fell asleep and woke up the next day so refreshed. And as my colleagues, she means her classmates, say that my face was brighter and more youthful. I wanted to share with you this amazing experience with the Self-Created Health workshop that I had. So this lady who had flown from Kuwait had what she described as a back pain that was so bad it was a killer back pain since 1998, which went within the workshop and it hasn't returned. And that was a really amazing one to witness. And another one, and this is, I've mentioned this man before and he's attended all the workshops and this was pretty awesome. Dr. Turner, he's the founder of the Irish Guild of Chiropractic Association. So he's been doing all this a long, long time. And as a chiropractor, he's seen really how the emotions get trapped into the structure of the physical body. And his comments were, the Self-Created Health Seminar has been the best ever healing experience I have ever attended in a long 37 years of learning natural therapies. It gets to the real root of all health problems and trapped emotions. So I thought that was a great to know that after 37 years of doing all these different things, and he said he'd done a huge amount of emotional healing workshops and you name it, he'd tapped it out or whatever it was, and he was blown away by this. I've got another one here, which is my sister flew in for tests last week with the consultants talking about when with regards to surgery and cancer rather than if. We're both very big on energy work and healing, so she was totally open to my offer of going through a self-created health process. We had such a powerful session together last Friday with me sending her some quantum touch healing whilst she was going through her 20 minutes of pain focus. Yesterday, she received the benign, all fine results, and while certainly deserving of huge credit for her positive approach throughout, she's adamant that it was the self-created health process that was responsible for turning it around. So that was another amazing one. And I actually have so many here that I could read you, but I'm conscious of the time, and I know that we're coming to the end of the allotted time slots. So I'll read you one more, because I can't resist, because it's such a good one. This one is one that I always mention at workshops because I witnessed it myself and it was quite something. I'm an old hand at complementary therapies and I gained healing from each and every one of them, from art therapy as an evening class at the local school, age 28, to self-created health 6 weeks ago at age 61. I've even gone through the training in some and worked as a therapist for a while. So this lady has seen it, she has done it, she's got the t-shirt, she's attended all the courses that are out there. And she was in one of the workshops I taught up in Aberdeen in Scotland. At first, this is what she says, at first glance, some of the techniques in self-created health seemed very familiar. I was very skeptical, but I was there. I'd paid my fee. She says, I'm an Aberdonian, so I want to get my money's worth, which I thought was quite funny. So I decided to throw myself right into it. Well, I have to tell you, this is something very special. Is it the combination of the techniques, the tweaks, the order, the teacher, my classmates? I don't know. And as I continue to heal, I'm beginning to accept I don't have to try and understand and control everything. So she's saying, you know, I have seen a lot of this before in different places, but why it worked, I can't tell you in the Self-Created Health workshop. Well, I could tell you it is a combination of the energy and her will to heal, but it's also very much the process and the order and how simple it was made for her to heal through this process. My story. Age 29, I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis because of unsightly lumps on my legs. Symptoms including fatigue and respiratory problems fluctuated over the years, and eventually 3 years ago, age 58, I had to start oxygen therapy. By the time my dear friend pointed me in the direction of self-created health, I was totally dependent on oxygen 24 hours a day. And I pulled it behind me in a trolley when I went out. I literally arrived at the workshop with my baggage. But of course, I wasn't aware of that on a conscious level at the time. I walked in guilt-ridden, in a twisted way that made me a good person in my eyes. In the safe space created by Karina and my classmates, I was guided to recognize that guilt was really anger that I had felt unsafe to express or even acknowledge to myself. Then I was given the tools to release that anger safely and work through the process and find peace and love. I came to realize that my illness was my badge of honor, my security, my emotional crutch, and my very handy tool for manipulating those around me, or at least trying to. I had been using illness to punish myself and others. I walked out a free person with choices and optimism, and I can look back at my old self with love, acceptance, and compassion. The emotional changes are deepening and strengthening. I am continuing to work on myself, and when I catch myself in an old pattern or responding according to an old belief, I know that here is an opportunity for me to dive in with self-created health again. I'm feeling physically much stronger. My breathing is much more comfortable. I am not using oxygen as a matter of course now. I monitor if I really need it. I found myself at my car the other day having forgotten all about it. Walking around my home unrestricted by tubes is such a joy. Thank you so much. I've had comments from a variety of people who didn't know I'd been on the course. They say, what have you been up to? You look taller. You're looking 10 years younger. What have you been taking and where can I get some? There's something different about you. Have you changed your hair? And where is your oxygen? I thought that was amazing because I was there and I witnessed it. And she was actually a demo that I did the discovery process with the class. And she just decided, and she knew as soon as she had found the cause and as soon as she saw herself very clearly what she was doing, that she didn't need the oxygen anymore. And we were all, I mean, all of our jaws were dropping, to be honest, because, you know, you've got someone who's hooked up to this tank that they're taking even to the loo with them, saying, I know I don't need this anymore, and wanting to unhook themselves there and then in the workshop. And so it's a huge thing. It's a massive thing. And it turns out that she did, and she didn't, you know, since the workshop, she just hasn't been attached to that oxygen tank anymore. It was the most phenomenal healing to witness, and to see. You could literally see it in her face. You saw her breathing instantly change as soon as she found her cause. It was so specific, and it always is. It's always so spot on, and that's where the power of this process is, because it's not vague. It's a direct match, and if it isn't a direct match, then you know that's not the cause, and you know to keep going. So that pretty much brings us, I've got so many more I could read you, but I'm very aware that it's a 45-minute webinar, and it's just a couple of comments. I'm gonna just quickly scan and hopefully here we go. I'm just going to answer one more question quickly from Lynn. Hi, Lynn. I've trained in EFT, I didn't get anywhere with it. If self-created health could help me, it would be fantastic. I've developed the belief that nothing will work. Does that matter with self-created health? What an amazing question. No, because it doesn't matter, because we would start with that as being the condition, believing that nothing will work, and we'd work backwards from that, and then we'd find where that started and address that. And once you've pulled down that belief, transform that into love, then everything else would flow amazingly well. So yeah, absolutely. And you're not the first. It's a brilliant question. You're not the first to say to me, I've trained in that type of technique, and saying, yeah, it took me a certain amount of the way, but it didn't take me all the way. Jodie, I love you too. And I got another question. Do you need to remember the emotional root? I've covered this already, but just to recap, you never block the memories out. What if the situation is quite complex? You'll only be given a certain amount. You'll only be given what you can handle is the answer to that question. So I've got another quick question here, which is, what if the individual has a viral infection? Can it work? Yes, absolutely. It doesn't matter what the label is that's placed on it, whether it's bacterial or viral or broken bones or whatever it is. The label doesn't matter, as long as you've got a place to start working with. In other words, can you describe the symptoms? Then yeah, absolutely, you can work with that, definitely. Okay, so I think that's all I've got time for. There's so many coming in. Here we go. Somebody's put some great research on the emotions, which I'll have to read at another time. Okay, so thank you so much for listening and for logging in. And I really feel, everybody, it's as if you're all kind of with me in the room, even though we're all in different parts of the country and even different parts of Europe. I know there's people that have logged in from abroad. So thank you so much. And if you're going out to see fireworks or you're watching them from your window, then I hope you enjoy them. And I hope this has been answered as many questions as possible and given you more of a foundation of what self-created health is about. I'm teaching a workshop at the beginning of December, and it will be the last self-created health workshop for a few months, because as you probably know, I'm going off to have a baby in January, so I won't be teaching for a few months, and so this is going to be the last one, and it's going to have I feel a very high energy around it. It's going to have a lot of releases going on and amazing insights, so I'd love you to join me. I invite you on that workshop. If you have taken the workshop before and you just fancy repeating or refreshing or just getting more insights, getting another experience, then Quantum Touch always offer 20% off any repeat advanced workshops. So you're more than welcome to do that. Otherwise, you can, if you want to book on, then you can book through my website, karinagrant.co.uk. As usual, I know I'll be seeing some of you at the level 2 this weekend, so I look forward to seeing you then, which is the last level 2 that I'm doing. Otherwise, I hope that you gained a lot of insight through this webinar about really the main thing is the link between the emotions and the physical body, and that we are just an expression of that. So I encourage you to investigate that further, and one way to do that would be to attend the Self-Created Health Workshop, simply because it's made so simple for you. All the research has been done and the process has been created. So I invite you to join me then. Have a lovely evening, and thank you so much for joining me, and I send you all lots and lots of love. Bye-bye.